What's up everybody, Cynda here, and welcome back to another episode of Cynda Talks. You know what I want? I want a game where you play as a 1-inch tall spaceman who commands an army of ant-like creatures who get stronger when they consume nectar. You guys see it too, right?
Pikmin 3 was released for the Nintendo Wii U in 2013, but it didn't get there easily. Pikmin 3's existence was actually confirmed as early as 2008. Then it was delayed. Then delayed again. Then we got a full unveiling of the game around June of 2012 at E3. Hopefully it doesn't take that long for the next mainline game, which is at the time of the script being written, following a very similar path to Pikmin 3's development. But eventually, Pikmin 3 was released for the Wii U. Now, the Wii U was an underrated gem of a console. I think the general belief is that people thought it was just an add-on to the Wii, which is justifiable, as Nintendo didn't do a great job showing us that the console was more than just the gamepad, this massive tablet thing the system came with. Anyways, some games implemented gamepad use much better than others, and Pikmin 3 was one of the better ones with some incredibly useful functionality that we'll cover later on. Now, on to the Pikmin 3 Retrospective review. Pikmin 3 follows after the events of Pikmin 2, a game that I've began to play but not yet completed. Anyways, the adventure starts by explaining the plight on the planet Kopai, where population growth on the planet has depleted the amount of food they have on the planet. In order to combat this, Kopai sends out satellites in order to scan nearby planets for supplies. And while most of these planets do not prove fruitful, one does contain fruit, and in order to collect the fruit and bring it back to the planet, 3 explorers, Alf, Brittany, and Charlie, are sent off to PNF 404, which is really just Earth in the far future. But unfortunately, they crash land on the surface and are separated. So after the crash, Alf splashes in a pool of water, Brittany's locked behind a crystal wall, and Charlie gets eaten. Whoops, that's terrible. So we have to get the band back together. Alf finds the red Pikmin, who have the ability to resist fiery attacks and also have more attack power than the other Pikmin types. Then he uses them to release the Onion, which works sort of like a Pikmin ATM for their respective type. In the red Onion, you can deposit and withdraw red Pikmin. Soon after, Alf reaches their ship, the SS Drake, and pilots it to the Garden of Hope. Now, I've been taking this video a little quickly, so let me show you one of the best things about Pikmin 3. That's right, this game is incredibly, almost oddly serene. Even though the captain of the ship is missing, another person is stuck, and all of these nightmarish alien creatures that eat your Pikmin coming out to fight, the game maintains this beautiful sense of serenity, and it doesn't let up until the end of the game. Every area is just this beautiful, naturalistic scenery. The music too, gosh, the music sounds so good. Twilight River, Distant Tundra, all so good. Plus, since this is the first HD Pikmin game, it can take the Wii U to its limits and display these gorgeous, almost photorealistic graphics, although only at a max of 720p, mostly because 1080p would cause tears in the fabric of reality since it would look too good. So we've talked about how good this game looks and sounds, but how does it play? Pikmin as a series is incredibly unique in its gameplay in that you control this army of Pikmin in real time, while most army strategy games like Advance Wars and Fire Emblem have armies being controlled in turn-based action. This real-time action is handled extremely well. It would be so easy to have weird controls, but you can play with a Wii Remote nunchuck and use the motion aiming to point where you want to throw your Pikmin, and this control scheme just feels right. You can also use the gamepad, and while it works pretty well, nothing beats the Wii Remote for this game, for me at least. Another issue that could arise are unfair elements, but nothing really feels unfair in this game. All of my screw-ups, even the major ones, felt like they were entirely my fault, not the game's jank. They also made the game easier, which is relieving since the earlier games in the series had a ton of insta-game over stuff, like if your Pikmin got hit with fire and weren't red, they're essentially toast. The actual day-to-day gameplay is fairly simple. Typically, there's a huge goal that the team needs to reach in a given area. Like in the Garden of Hope, there's a signal coming from a huge hollowed-out tree stump, so the team is meant to build a bridge and reach it. The challenge of Pikmin 3 comes from trying to reach these goals safely but also efficiently. This makes Pikmin 3 an almost infinitely replayable game, since you're always trying to optimize your route and get to the goal as quickly as possible, while also losing as few Pikmin as possible. There's also plenty to do besides rush directly to the goal. You're required to collect various fruits scattered across the planet, because if you run out, then you get a game over. You also have to collect a large majority of the fruit to get the good endings. There are also quite a few enemies placed around the stages that you can dodge, but it's really not safe since Pikmin are carrying things around and can get attacked. So once you fight them, the Pikmin can take the defeated enemy back to the onion and create new Pikmin. This means that there's almost always something you could be doing to grow your army of Pikmin or get closer to completing your goal. Now we're reaching the end of the game, and after trekking around for a while, the trio comes across 2 more explorers a while into the game. The adventurers rescue Louie, Olimar's assistant in Pikmin 2, who steals all of your fruit juice. The explorers have collected up to that point, leading to the best part of the game, where you have every Pikmin type and get to explore the Garden of Hope again. And after flying all around PNF 404, collecting all the fruit they missed in order to reach 100% completion, it's time for the worst part of the game, the Formidable Oak. This game's finale is so bad, I have to talk about it, so spoilers. Once Alph and Co. enter the Formidable Oak, they find Olimar, and they have to carry him using Pikmin who follow Brittany. But as they're making their way through the oak, a huge blob appears, and it's obsessed with Olimar. So now they have to rush all around, building bridges, turning on lights, etc. Now I hate this part of the game because it's one of the best examples of kind of the same, but not in a good way, syndrome-itis. This part of the game is still definitely Pikmin 3, but the escort mission and blob thing just make the game not fun. And at the end, too. It's like going on a walk, and it's one of the best walks you've ever been on, then you sprain your ankle walking back into your house. But this is just a small smudge on an otherwise fantastic game. Wait, hold on, there's more? Huh. In October of 2020, Nintendo released an enhanced version of Pikmin 3, Pikmin 3 Deluxe on the Switch, with new content and a brand new ultra spicy difficulty mode. When I heard this port was coming out, my first concern was immediately with the controls. How do you control a game like this? And since Wii Remote controls were so mind-blowingly perfect, any control scheme the Switch version tried was at risk of being lesser than the Wii U version. And thank goodness they added gyro controls that work almost identically to Super Mario Galaxy in the 3D All-Stars collection. Which is great, because I was worried that they would only have stick controls, but honestly, the stick controls work really well, and I almost prefer them to the gyro controls. Unfortunately, however, the graphical upgrades in 3 Deluxe are somewhat disappointing, and that's because there aren't any. And that's such a bummer, because this is one of, if not the best looking Wii U game on the system, and seeing a bump from 720p to 1080p would have gone such a long way. Unfortunately, it still has a touch of muddiness that really shows 7 years later. Pikmin 3 Deluxe even comes with some bonus content, with the brand spanking new Side Stories mode, featuring Olimar and Louie as a duo in Pikmin 2. And this was strangely brushed over in a lot of the promotional material leading up to release. I mean, this is the first new Pikmin content in about 7 years. You'd think they'd hype it up more than this, right? Well, I think it has a lot to do with the fact that this content reuses the old maps and assets, but in really smart ways to really refresh the maps, like going the other way around locations or making the duo traverse the environments in different ways to the original game. Even though these missions are basically just more mission mode maps, they're such a good addition, and with the smart design choices to refresh the old maps, they don't even feel samey like you would think.
So that's Pikmin 3 and Pikmin 3 Deluxe, although I did not get around to finishing Pikmin 3 Deluxe's bonus content until over a year after I got the game, which delayed this episode by about a year. These games are good, I swear!